Hello, welcome back to my channel, and on today's video we are going to learn about inverse function. So basically what we are going to do is to learn how to write the inverse of a linear and a quadratic function. So let's start, and there's something also very important. We also need to state the restricted domain of each of these functions. So the first thing we're going to do is they told us that the function of x equals 4x plus 3. And if you're my student and you used to follow my video, you will find out that f of x is the same thing as y. So y equals 4x plus 3, right? So we want to find the inverse. What you just have to do is switch between x and y. So in place of y, I will write x equals 4. So in place of x, I will write y plus 3. Okay? Because I want to find the inverse. So I can simplify this equation now to make y the subject formula. So this will be x. I will take 3 over to the left hand side. That will be 3 equals 4y. Okay? So let me bring this down a bit. So this I can easily say divide both sides by 4, divide both sides by 4, because I want to make y the subject formula. So I'll have x minus 3 over 4 to be equals my y inverse. Okay? Because if you write it only y, you will be confused with the original equation. But this is the inverse of the original equation. And that is how to write the inverse of a function. So another thing you also need to talk about is the restricted domain. And we all know, if you are my student, you know that the domain of every linear equation are always what? All real numbers. So there is no restriction in the domain of this equation. So, and that is that about the linear function. So let's talk about the quadratic. No, now in the quadratic part, one thing you also need to do is that you can also write it that y equals x squared minus 6x plus 10. Remember, we can switch f of x to y. So what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to switch this, right? Put this to be y and this to be y. And that is going to give us a very big challenge. So, because we have two x's here. So the best thing for you to do is to convert this standard form of quadratic equation to vertex form. So, and we all know that the vertex form of quadratic equation is written in the form of ax minus h squared plus k. Okay? And how do you convert this to be in this form? We use completing the square. So now let's use completing the square, because we cannot factor this, because there are no two numbers where you multiply, you get 10, and when you add them, you get negative 6. So we use completing the square. So for completing the square, have y equals x squared minus 6x plus square root of minus 6 over 2 squared. Remember completing the square. So you are going to divide the b, okay, and square it. Then you do the same thing again with minus 6 over 2 squared, then plus 10, plus 10. Okay? So your y will now give rise to x squared minus 6x. Negative 6 divided by 2 will give you negative 3. So negative 3 squared will give you plus 9. Plus 9, this will also give you plus 9, which is minus 9. Then plus 10. So now you have succeeded in doing the completing the square. But we need this part, okay, of the quadratic, which is the perfect square trinomial, so that we can be able to factor. So y will now be x. So which two number, when you multiply, you get 9, and when you add them, you get negative 6. It's going to give you negative 3, negative 3. So we have factored this quadratic. So we have negative 9 plus 10 we give you plus 1, right? So let's go a bit up. Okay. So you now have y equals, you can rewrite this as we have negative x cube, negative x, but we have negative, sorry, we have x minus 3, x minus 3 squared plus 1 because they repeat themselves. So we have successfully converted this standard form to vertex form. You can see it. This is the vertex form of quadratic equation. So now we can now do the inverse. Now we can do the inverse. So let's do it here. Let's do the inverse function. Our answer is x minus 3 squared plus 1. Okay? So here we can switch between x and y. So this will be x equals y minus 3 squared plus 1. So basically, what you just have to do is you take 1 to the other side, negative 1 equals y minus 3 squared. So we remove this squared by squaring both sides. So we now have x minus 1 equals y minus 3. So we can also take away 3 to the other side. So we can have y, which we have already made, the subject formula. So negative 3 to this side will be plus 3. 3 plus square root of x minus 1 equals y inverse. Okay? Now, we have successfully, okay, converted, or we have written the inverse of the initial function. So the next thing we need to talk about is the restricted value of y, or the restricted domain. So for the restricted domain, restricted domain, so we are talking about which value of x we make this equation not valid. So we'll take everything inside the radical sign. So the radicand, which is x minus 1, must be greater or equals to 0. So what this statement means is that anything inside your radicand should be greater than 0, should be greater or equals to 0. Because if you have something like negative 2 inside your radicand, you remember it's going to give you error, right? Or we'll not start doing imaginary, okay? We'll not start, separating it where you have this and this, okay? But we are not doing that here. We just want to know the value at which x must not be equal to, or must not associate itself with x. So that is why it must be greater or equals to 0. So now say x is greater or equals to 1. All right? So what it means is that every value from 1 to positive infinity, we make this equation correct. Okay? Let me use that word. But anything below this, we make it incorrect. Okay? So this is the restricted domain of this particular expression. Okay? So you can write it this way or this way. You are correct. I hope this video is helpful. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and put your comments there. See you in my next video. Peace out.